All right, so let's talk about the hip flexors, particularly the psoas major, which is a very big muscle. I like to call it the filet mignon of muscles, and its role on how the spine works. And so, if we were to identify the hip flexors themselves, a large part of it is form equals function. So here I have a very rough sketch of how the psoas muscle can operate. And so here I have the head-on picture of the spine, and the hip flexors actually originate on the anterior or the front aspects of the vertebrae of T12, L1, L2, L3, L4, and L5. They attach right here on the anterior portions of the vertebrae, and then they come all together, these fibers come all together, and they insert into this area called the lesser trochanter of the femur. And so the main actions for the hip flexors is going to be hip flexion, which is in essence lifting that leg up towards your face. And so if we were to look at it from the side, where here is the front side of the body and here is the back side of the body, you'll be able to see that here you have your T12, you have these muscles that actually attach on the front aspects of the vertebrae, and again, it comes on down. And the reason why I wanted to show you the side angle was to give you the opportunity to also see the muscles on the other side of the back. And a lot of people, or what you'll see, a large portion of the muscles will see, these are called your erector spinae. And they are actually acting as stabilizers and back extensors. And when I mean back extensors, what that truly means is that our extension equals arching, and flexion equals bending. And oftentimes I find that these two muscles work together really well. And when I say really well is that when working together, they can create a lot of force and a lot of tension, and they can maintain tension for a long period of time. And the reason being is that when people think of muscle joints or joints in the body, they often think that it's going to be one stationary joint with a movable arm. And so what people often think when it comes to hip flexors, they think specifically that it's going to be lifting that leg up towards the ceiling. The truth of the matter is, though, is that joints do not act in isolation, and the roles of the joints themselves can change. And so what that means is, here you look at this picture above, right? You have your static, and then you have removable object, but the reality is that you can also have this joint be the movable object, and then the other end is going to be static. And so what that means is that the force, when a muscle contracts, it doesn't just contract in one direction. The force of the muscles will always be focusing, when it comes to shortening of the muscle, it all comes to shortening and coming together. And so how does this work for hip flexors? If you look at the hip flexor and say, for example, if the spine is static in this scenario, again, this is going to be the front and this is going to be the back. When you have a static spine, the hip flexor's role is to lift this leg up. And so as you can see, it's going to be bending up. But then if we move on to another scenario where actually if this is the front and this is the back, we actually make it so that this leg is the static point, and then the rest of the body, the spine, is moving. What the hip flexor's role is to do is to arch the back, or hence extend the back. And so as you can see, if the forces are contracting this way, it's making the spine, and these are our spine, this is our vertebrae, it's going to make everything shift forward. And what's interesting is the fact that as muscles get shortened, the interesting thing is the fact that these muscles in the back, again, these muscles right here are called the erector spinae. And when you have the erector spinae and hip flexors working together, you are going to get this bigger motion of arching of the back. And this video is not necessary to demonize specific positions, but when you are experiencing hip flexor tightness, if you're experiencing groin issues, if you're experiencing a really tight back and your back is spasming, what that could be telling us is the fact that the hip flexors are working very, very hard in line with our back extensors. And it's important for us as we take a deep dive into this issue and solving this challenge is try to figure out why are these muscles working so hard? Is it because of the fact that muscles are weak? And if we look at this position here, we're looking at specifically pelvic positioning. Could it be, and I'm going to draw other aspects of the muscles, could it be that our abdomen, which here's our rib cage, right? If our abdomen is weak, could it be that our butt muscles are weak? Could it be that our hamstrings are tight? There's so many different factors, but one thing to keep of note is that we have to look at what is going on here. And ultimately, tight hip flexors, tight low back, they could be a cause, they could be a result. But the reality is that if we are to avoid or overlook the concept of how the hip flexors can have an impact on the back, we're really missing a huge part. So this is a quick little anatomy breakdown biomechanics lesson of the hip flexors in the back and how it actually addresses pelvic, back, and positioning. And I hope this is helpful.